All right, you can share your screen. Who's going first?
Okay.
And sorry, before you begin, I just want to let everyone know we're gonna just get through all the presentations first, and then we'll do all your questions at the end, like in terms of like course material and stuff like that. We'll answer everything at the end. Go ahead.
And
Also,
one thing for
do you see
the
my screen?
yeah, we can see it. One thing for the
Yeah.
presenters is that once you're done your presentation, just go back to the question that you have for the class, so then they can answer if they want to. So that's the only thing you guys gotta do after you're done presenting.
If you have one plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
You guys can start.
All right, guys. My name is Nijesh,
I'm Paolo.
and today we're going to be talking to you guys about machine learning and medical diagnosis. So they did surgery on a grape. Pretty sure you guys all know this. It's a huge meme, but this was done by the Da Vinci robot, and it uses interpolation, which is a technique that's used to predict future values using previous values, and that's used for extreme precision. And you see here, it's placing the skin on top of the grape, and it's picking up the suture to stitch the skin to the grape, the skin to the flesh. So yeah. And then history of AI in medicine, or medical diagnosis in specific. So the first thing we stumbled upon was a product by Arteris called Cardio AI. This is able to analyze a bunch of cardiac functions. So it gives you like ECGs and a bunch of other stuff. And the cool thing about this, it was off the shelf, and it was viable to be used in clinical diagnostics. It's a remote patient monitoring system. So I don't know if you guys have ever used a Holter monitor, but your cardiologist will stick it on to you for three or 2 days, depending, it varies. But you're not allowed to shower. It's not water resistant, so you have to walk around with that, and it's very tedious. But this is more of a non-invasive method, and it transmits data real time. So you can, you wear it like it's almost like an Apple Watch. You wear it, and it's very convenient. And it was a huge advancement in this sense. So I have a question for you guys, just to pick your brains a bit. What is the incentive to use AI for medical diagnostics? I'll give you guys 30 seconds. You guys can type it in the chat or turn on your mics. So why would we opt for AI instead of, humans or surgeons? Yeah.
John.
There can be a lot of data at hand, and it's hard to analyze it all quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now. It's really good. So low marginal cost. Yes, that's true. Very true. Reduced human error, I think, is probably the biggest by far. You're removing the human component. Like eventually, we'll remove the human component completely, and you have much more accurate diagnoses, right? You have a much more accurate diagnosis for a patient, and it's very reliable, because sometimes you get misdiagnosed, and there's a bunch of stuff that goes along with that. But this is very accurate in terms of leaving out the human error.
And I think Michael had one more thing to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say that like accurate diagnostics in relation to like imaging and stuff.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, for that. And then this is really interesting. So cancer diagnosis with deep learning. So we're going to be talking about the methylation method first. So different types of cancers actually use different methylation patterns. So for example, prostate cancer would have a different methylation pattern than pancreatic cancer. And this is really interesting because, when you wouldn't be able to do that by hand and without technology, right? Without, like computing would take forever. But since you have AI, AI can look at such a big scale or such a small scale, and it can analyze a large data set, a huge data set, to the point where it can analyze a DNA strand and see, okay, where is this methyl actually bonding to, right? And yeah, the second point is it checks for small hydrocarbon molecules, so methyls, attached to DNA. The thing that's the coolest to me personally is FocalNet. And that's a prostate cancer diagnosis technology. And how it works is, a study I read, they fed in 400 multi-parametric MRIs of, early onset prostate cancer lesions into it. And it got very, very accurate at predicting prostate lesion aggressiveness and actually identifying prostate cancer. So that was really cool, in my opinion. And then bridging from that, we have actual MRI usage and tying in AI with MRI. One of the main points of using AI and MRI is so we can actually provide, an accurate diagnosis. So it can identify minor changes that, your surgeon or radiologist might not actually notice. And in this, in this example, they were able to, MRIs were able to predict, MRI AIs were able to predict the onset of early ischemic stroke by looking at the tissue changes over time. And sometimes, like MRIs for brains and organs in general, they vary from person to person, and sometimes that leads to misdiagnosis. And this is very helpful in the term that like because AI has a huge it's very sensitive. The more you train it, it has a greater sensitivity to bigger differences, right? So it could be able to actually check for early ischemic stroke, and actually you're able to take preventative measures or get better treatment at the stage you're at.
So another use of medical AI right now is in Google Health and with DeepMind. So Google Health has used machine learning to create a user-friendly personal assistant called Stream. And Stream is a medical app that supports doctors and nurses on the go. So they allow quick access to critical information about patients, such as vital signs, blood results, diseases, and other types of conditions that the patient may have. Data set that doctors can input whenever they would like on the app. It saves lives by analyzing the patient's information and sends alerts to healthcare workers about any potential life-threatening problem that may arise before they even happen. So currently this is being used in UK facilities, and they're using it to detect the future likelihood of a condition called acute kidney injury. So I'm going to talk to you about future developments of medical AI. And there's many studies out there for the future of this type of artificial intelligence. And today I'll cover 2 up and coming applications. So there's currently research being made on the analysis of red blood cells using AI. This study shows how much faster and more efficient artificial intelligence can be when examining red blood cell morphology compared to human experts. So the shape of the red blood cell is actually really important because it can reveal its health and its age. So the older they become, the less useful they are in transporting oxygen throughout the body. And red blood cell shapes can also be used to diagnose patients with certain disorders. So one example, what I have on the screen here is sickle cell disease. So there's some red blood cells that are in the shape of a crescent or a sickle-like shape. And a robot can quickly find these abnormal shapes in a patient's bloodstream, and they can find treatment at a faster rate than if a human were to analyze the blood themselves. To help you understand how much faster a robot can be when compared with a human, I just want to show you this clip of a machine finding Waldo in a matter of seconds on a piece of paper. So it analyzes its find the Waldo on the page. And even if you change the setting, if you flip the page, it'll find the next Waldo in a matter of seconds. So you can understand how important this application could be when it comes to a life-threatening disease. So the faster you can detect these abnormalities, the faster you can get treatment. So this final topic may spark some concern to many of you. So if you remember earlier in this presentation, we talked about performing surgery on a grape, and we showed you a clip of that. So now machine learning is being taken to the next level with surgery being performed by robots. Studies such as one in Da Vinci's AI suggest removing human error altogether, and with sufficient data, robots might be allowed to function without any human assistance to perform complicated procedures. So the thought of an autonomous surgical robot being used commercially isn't that far off, because companies like Google and Johnson & Johnson are collaborating to create more innovative surgical robots. Before we conclude our presentation, we actually have one final question to ask all of you. So in the future, we really could have robots taking over the jobs of surgeons. And with that being said, would you trust a robot to perform surgery on you? Yeah, and that's our presentation. We have our references on the final slide.
Thank you guys
Yeah,
for
thank you
listening.
for listening.
Thank you so much. That was really
Alright.
good. Anybody have anything to add to the or answer their question?
Let's go.
I see some comments in the chat. I'd look.
Paulo, do you have to leave soon?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. I
Yeah.
can answer like.
Yeah.
okay.
Michael, do you want to unmute and go ahead?
Yeah, just like to answer like first of all, the presentation was like really well done. And in
Thank you,
terms of
thank
like
you.
the question to answer, like I trust the robot to perform surgery. I think I would say yes, just because there's already like so many applications of medical robots and medical equipment and devices being used in like current surgeries. Like for example, there's like coronary artery bypasses that already use robotic devices. So it's already pretty safe, and it's shown that it's pretty effective as well.
Right, yeah. I feel like the human error will be removed altogether, so it would be reliable. Maybe there's going to be some bugs, but other than that, it should
Yeah,
be
for
good.
sure.
David?
I was just gonna say that too. It's like once we know that like the robot error was the same or less than human error, then I'd go for it. But like as long as the error is unknown, it would feel sketchy.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There could be bugs in the system.
Yeah, because it's like, like as soon as it hits the human error margin, like you have some confidence that, okay, like even if I go to the surgeon, it's the same, same error. But yeah, it's a good point.
All right, last one, Henry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I agree with what's already been said. I'd probably just based on the type of surgery. So maybe if it was something like where you're gonna be sedated, you're not even gonna be conscious. To me, it doesn't really matter who's doing the operation, right? If the risk is the same, it doesn't really matter, right? So I think why not?
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good
Yeah.
presentation too. I really enjoyed the videos, so it was a good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, I really liked how you use like little video clips to add to your presentation. That was really good. All right,
Thank you.
moving on.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Next
All
group. Thank you, guys.
Next one is David and Renee. You guys are here.
Raneem, your part's first. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, sure. Give me a minute. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So our topic is about AI in the workplace. So we're gonna be talking about how long they're gonna what it takes for AIs to work in the workplace and how they're biased and discriminatory. What is AI in the workplace? Well, as simple as that, AI in the workplace is like robots working in human jobs. Many people in society believe that it is a blessing to have robots working in the workplace. However, many others disagree with that. We would be mentioning that further on the presentation, sorry. And then some people believe that robots working the workplace is a good thing because they can handle boring and repetitive tasks without caring, because they have no emotions and they're just programmed to do things that it won't matter, like how humans care. And they can get impactful work completed because they are programmed to do something and they can work as long as they can until they are programmed to stop. Humans, on the other hand, need breaks throughout their jobs, and they can deal with challenges. They're really good at dealing with challenges in less than 24 hours because they can think, they can use their research and then solve the challenge. And they can be used for advertising and marketing and bring clients over to their jobs. How it works. How it works is technically they gather a large amount of data and then they throw it into a software where it automatically keeps repeating the patterns so that the data can be in the software and the machine can memorize it. It'll memorize it until it keeps repeating until it generates an outcome. And many people think robots are a bad idea because they have many cons, like how they can be biased. That would be explained further on. But now we're going to be talking about the basics of a workplace. What is a basic of a workplace? Customer service. AIs already have customer service. For instance, if you call CIBC, a robot, like a machine would pull up, an animated machine would pull up and be like, if you want access to this website, click 1. That is considered customer service. However, later on, they're going to advance it to the point where they're going to be having a one-on-one conversation. Researching and computer technology. Researching and computer technology is already what an AI does, so that they already have that basic need. Organization and problem solving. If an employee doesn't have organization or problem solving, then they are not needed, because who would want someone who can't solve their own problems? No one has time to go to a person and solve their own problem. Empathy and learning. Empathy and learning is something they don't have because they have no emotions and they're programmed to do something to the point where once they've done something, they stop. There's no improvements. Teamwork. In the future, I see robots as not working together and being more competitive. So I don't find they have that quality of teamwork. Communication. It's good to have basic communication skills so that they can have a conversation with their clients. Is it possible? This is a question that many people ask. How can robots work in a workplace without being biased? Well, if that's the case, there's an experiment. I took a robotics class last semester that actually explained this. It depends who programs it, because there was an experiment that took place where 2 applications were being put into a machine where it was the same applications, same skills. It was a copy paste, but the only difference was the names, where one application had a Western name while the other had a Middle Eastern name. And then the Middle Eastern application got declined right away while the other one got accepted. And the problem for that was because the person who programmed that machine was biased. So they programmed that machine to think alike, and that's why it never worked. We need diversity in machines in order to make this work, if that's ever going to happen, which is why it is debatable in society. But however, they do meet some basic requirements, but that's not all that's needed. But it is not impossible. And there are other more problems, such as they are extremely expensive. They're extremely expensive. The government can't even pay for clean water for indigenous people, so I don't think they would pay for this. And at the end of the day, they're machines, so the storage will end at some point, and then you can't have more information. They have responsibility issues and ethical challenges. Ethical challenges has to do with the cons that will also be discussed later on. And AI could be very dangerous depending on who ends up programming, because they can end up with scientists to the point where they can do horrible things, such as identity theft or killing someone, or not knowing where to what qualifications they need to put, to the point where it makes it seem like a diverse machine. And now AI and bias in the workplace, David will take us from here.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to unmute. Do you mind keeping doing the slides for me? I'll just tell you when to go to the next one, if that's okay. Oh, or I can share. All right, can you guys see that? My computer is old and slow, so I apologize. We'll see how it works.
You're good, we can see.
Okay. Okay, so AI and bias in the workplace. Here we're going to kind of specifically talk about bias in corporate hiring, job evaluation, and job promotion processes. There's other ways that AI can be involved in bias, but these are kind of the main ones we're going to focus on. I read a good quote that I liked when I was doing the research for this. It said that when it comes to hiring diversely, our own brains are often the enemy. Bias can be insidious and completely unconscious. So when it comes to discriminatory hiring practices or like bias in the workplace, it's often easy to think that people are doing it on purpose, or it's like overt racism in some ways. And a lot of times it's not. It's completely unconscious. The people don't know that they're doing it necessarily. And it can also work in both positive and negative ways. So bias hiring or bias job promotion can mean that sometimes you don't give people a job that they deserve. And that's like negative bias. But it can also mean that you're biased to thinking some people are worth more or better at their job just because of certain traits. And you can over reward those people. And that can hurt you as a corporation in that way too. I'll just go. So there's different ways that AI can be involved in bias in the workplace, or not bias in the workplace, but in the workplace when it comes to job promotion, hiring, and evaluation. Some of them are basic language processors that comb through data found in resumes. Some are sophisticated chatbots that actually conduct interviews and evaluations. And others use social media networks to find, assess potential future job candidates and recruit them to apply to the company. There's even others that I was reading about too, that conduct video interviews with you and then analyze the data in order to assess a candidate's enthusiasm, empathy, honesty, and communication skills. So this is just a brief overview of what is discrimination and bias. There's a lot of ways and a lot of things that can be discriminated or biased against, but here I just listed a bunch. Age, disability, parental status, sexual orientation, religion, race, ethnicity, gender, and retaliation. And retaliation is kind of basically what it sounds like. When I was doing some more reading on like the legal implications of this, a lot of it had to do with, on a large scale, like whistleblowers. So if you've worked if you've been a corporate whistleblower for one company, meaning that you saw something going on that wasn't right and you publicized it and stood up for that, some other companies, even good companies, might not take you on or take kind of that group of people on because they're afraid of basically that you would do it again, or just even kind of corporate troublemaking, that you may pose problems for them. You might be too nosy. You might, even if they make an accident on purpose, you might be someone that finds it and brings it to the press rather than to your superiors kind of. And it can be difficult to find a job as a whistleblower or as someone who has been associated with, say, labor union movements. I don't know if you guys have read about that, but Amazon is rather anti-labor union, and they've done a lot to suppress that kind of thing. So that's kind of a retaliation discrimination. So there's a lot of pros when you talk about using AI and to try to get rid of workplace bias. So the use of AI in hiring and job evaluation can negate physical, gender, racial, age, and other discrimination-based bias because it's just taking in the facts, or that's the goal of the AI, is to just take in the facts. It's not judging based on all the things that sometimes people are biased and judge for. It has direct benefits to corporate financing, means it helps you hire and promote the best people, which leads to increased efficiency and profits. It also has a very low marginal cost of use. And then indirect benefits to corporate governance. So this has two sides of it, and I'll talk about that in the next thing too, but on a positive note, AI can avoid discrimination lawsuits caused by individual bad actors, meaning that if you're, say, a company that gives out loans, you're a bank that gives out loans, you have a ton of people who work in your corporation who give out loans to people. And you need to trust that each and every single one of them are not discriminating, because you as a bank or as an institution can be held legally responsible for their discrimination. AI takes all of these, I mean, you can literally say like thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs, and it congregates it into one centralized system, where as long as you don't have discriminatory AI, you know that these loans are being assessed in a non-discriminatory way. However, the key there is you have to know that you don't have discriminatory AI. And that leads us right to our cons of using AI in the workplace. AI is not itself naturally unbiased. I saw someone put up in the chat asking if the programmer was biased in the example that Raneem gave, or if the data set was biased. And that's exactly what happened in Amazon's hiring AI, or in Amazon's hiring process in their AI that they stopped using back in 2015. I think they use a much better one now. But basically the data being fed into it was biased data, and that led to them, the AI itself, having biased outcomes. More applications came from men, more applications had been ran through the data system that came from men, and the AI taught itself that male applications were preferable, that that's what you wanted to look for. Where in fact, what happened was male applications were no more preferable than female applications. There was just so much fewer female applications. The AI took that to mean that females in general weren't as preferable as males, which was accidental. And as soon as Amazon realized this, they got rid of it, and this was not their goal. But it can happen, I don't want to say very easily, but kind of very easily, especially if you're dealing with a industry that is non-diverse or a geographic location that's non-diverse. Having a diverse data set is super, super important. Equitable AI, in the next point, it requires equitable human actors. So there's lots of good information online about how you can use AI to increase and promote diversity in your hiring, to increase and promote diversity in your promotional process from within your company. But every single one of those ways you can help and increase diversity, you can also use it to decrease diversity. And that's something that in some ways we have to legally fight against, the same as we would fight against a company that's being on purpose discriminatory. But basically, if your human actors involved aren't acting in good faith, meaning they're doing the right thing, basically, AI can't undo that. The third point there, that's a con, is companies using AI that is accidentally discriminatory may be held legally responsible for discrimination. So like I talked about before, lawsuits for violation of anti-discriminatory lending, specifically is a few of the articles that I read about. This is a con for having AI in the workplace, but it's also, I believe, a con for adoption of AI in the workplace, because companies are going to be wary of the fact that if this piece of data, or this piece of code, basically, that a lot of them won't necessarily understand is bias, they'll be held legally responsible. And humans often have a tendency towards feeling more comfortable with what is known than what is unknown. So from these, the future recommendations, there's a need for continuous human oversight. Like the case of the AI at Amazon, if there was no human oversight that was going over the results of the use of this AI, the mistakes would have never been caught and discriminatory AI would have kept being used. Diversity begets diversity. This works on multiple levels. On a simple level, you need a diverse team of development. Often that diverse team of development will help you have a more diverse data set that's fed through your AI. As well, when you deal with AI that's actively recruiting job applicants and is going through your employees' social networks as a starting block, if you don't have a diverse employee base to begin with, chances are that you're not going to get a diverse recruitment out of people that weren't diverse to begin with. So you need to have a diverse team, and you also need to know your business. You need to know your people, know your team, know your geography, know your industry. If you're in an industry or geography that is not diverse, then you need to cast a wider net. And starting just from your employees' social networks may necessarily not be the way to do it. And also, unbiased AI requires unbiased development. And as I've given examples, that's not necessarily unconscious or conscious. It can be both, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to make up for, or sorry, to avoid. And discussion question. Overall, do you think AI in the workplace will be able to get rid of underlying bias, or instead be a tool that reflects bias? And I know personally from everything I've read, I'm not totally sure which. I think you could even say I'm sorry to answer the question, it doesn't make it a discussion, but just from what I've read, the better AI gets, I think the better it'll be a tool for getting rid of bias. As it is right now, I think that's a good debatable question. And those are our references, which none of you care about right now. I'll go back to the question. Thank you.
Great job, guys. Start off the discussion with Maha.
All right, so I know like a lot of training data for artificial intelligence is based on real data. And if we get real data from like companies that might not have equitable like data sets to or like diversified data sets to train off of, we definitely won't be able to create an equitable AI. So I think the largest challenge with this kind of artificial intelligence is, where do we get the data set, right? How do we make sure it's equitable? Like, it's all these kind of ethical questions.
John?
Yes, I had a question early on in the presentation. Maybe I missed it, but it said something about the AI memorizing data, which from my understanding only happens in overfitting, which is a bad thing. So I just wasn't exactly, I didn't exactly follow how AI was supposed to memorize data.
Does the group want to answer that?
It wouldn't memorize data, but because it's been generating inside the machine for quite a while, they would like know the pattern. It would keep going until an outcome comes, and then that's it. It's stuck up there. It's like when you put stuff in Google, because many people are researching it, it's there. So that's how with the machine, it's the same thing.
So recognizing patterns, you're saying?
Yeah, it recognizes patterns, exactly.
Okay. Anyone
Okay,
else?
thanks for the clarification.
Anyone else want to add anything else, or should we move on? All right, guys, great job. That was really good, really informative. Thank you. Let's move on to our third group, Arslan.
It's both the Christian Albarelli.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen real quick. There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm on my, because I couldn't contact my group member. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. I'll start now. Hello, my name is Christian Rizopoulos. This presentation is regarding weighing the human brain's intelligence up against computers today and in the future. Please let me know later in the discussion board what you guys think, what you guys hypothesize surrounding which one is more intelligent. The question for this reflection is, do you believe that it is possible to build a computer that has all the capabilities of a human brain? If yes, do we need to understand how the brain works in order to build computers that can outperform us? If no, what is so special about human cognition that it can't be done by wires and microchips? So, we are living in a period where technology is advancing at a rate faster than ever in history. The power of the computer has vastly increased in the past few years, as much so that our iPhones in our pockets today are millions of times more powerful than the computer that was used to take and guide the first humans, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, across 356,000 kilometers space from the Earth to the Moon in 1969. The computer back then was a command module computer designed at MIT called the Apollo Guidance Computer. It used an operating system that let astronauts type in nouns and words that were translated into instructions for their spaceship. The hardware built by AGC was controlled by built-in machine code instructions using a compiler called Luminary. Put in numbers, the now considered old iPhone 6 was capable of 3.36 billion instructions per second. Also, the iPhone 6's clock is 32,600 times faster than the best Apollo era computers and is capable of performing instructions 120 million times faster. In other words, if you said an iPhone could be used to guide 120 million Apollo era space rockets to the moon all at the same time, you would not be wrong in that theory. Today, this technology is ancient, but back in 1969, it was revolutionary. The capabilities of computers today are far more advanced than what they were back then. A USB stick, let alone a Wi-Fi router, is more powerful today than the computer they used back then. The most powerful computer on this planet is the Japanese Fugaku. It is able to run highly complex simulations involving a large number of variables at the same time. Some examples of what it can be used for is economic, neurological, and environmental modeling, including how the COVID-19 virus mutates and spreads, something highly relevant right now. It is 3 times more capable as the second place US computer counterpart and making computations. So if we want to talk about comparing the intelligence of a human to a computer, it is quite clear that when it comes to data analytics, problem solving, and probability calculations, the computers today have an enormous upper hand on us. To look further into the question of who is smarter, humans or computers, it depends on what you measure intelligence by. If you want to compare intelligence by analytical capabilities, computers win every time. Now, the purpose of the Fugaku computer is to provide a high performance artificial intelligence platform that can process large amounts of data at a ridiculously higher speeds using deep learning rather than conventional machine learning. This computer not only uses AI as a tool, but also tests the limits and capabilities of AI to the edge of our current technology. Here's one of 2 graphs showing the advancement of the power in our computers throughout the years. And in the later years, you can see the constant increase, which contributes to the computer's artificial intelligence sophistication. And to give you a better understanding of how computers line up against the human brain with a visual, what you can see here is based on Moore's law. Moore's law is a principle showcasing how the speed and capability of computers can be expected to double biannually. This is because of the increases in the number of transistors a microchip can contain. The first linear graph shows a more summarized visual of the impact of Moore's law. And this second graph is a more sophisticated and detailed version of Moore's law, showing the transistors count in the y-axis and the years each individual microchip was introduced, showing their relationship consistent with Moore's law's theory. So I cannot make a presentation on the comparison between the human brain and computers' capabilities without mentioning the world famous match between Garry Kasparov and IBM's chess playing computer Deep Blue at the earliest stages of artificial intelligence. The first time a computer was capable of beating a chess world champion in a game of chess, showcasing, as I mentioned earlier, computers are most definitely more analytically gifted than humans, with a much better capability of problem solving. And so in the early 1990s, Deep Blue was designed by IBM as the successor to their previous chess purpose, Deep Thought and Chip Test, and other previous attempts that failed. On February 10th, 1996, history was made when Deep Blue defeated the Russian Grandmaster in a one of a 6-game series, causing headlines globally. However, in the 1997 rematch, as you can see on the slideshow, it won, deciding the 6th game in only 19 moves, a dramatic improvement. This only marked the first time a current world champion had lost a match to a computer under tournament conditions, once again causing headlines globally. This is especially significant because this was a huge milestone of evidence for the artificial intelligence capabilities of computers and what they could be capable in the future, showcasing directly technological progress that can be made. I challenge you guys to put yourself in the shoes of a person in 1996 to 1997 and think about the thought process you would have surrounding the future capabilities of computers after hearing the news of the Deep Blue computer beating the Grandmaster a second time. In case you didn't know, the Deep Blue IBM RS6000 SP computer was using 256 processors working in tandem, capable of evaluating 200 million chess positions per second. So, indeed, if the thought process is that the brain is smarter than a computer, it is crucial to quantify the brain's capabilities in order to understand what we know about the brain so far and what makes us the smartest species on the planet. One function that makes the brain special, according to researchers, is that a brain cell uses 26 different ways to code its quote unquote bits. The brain can store bits from calculations that they made, it was found that the brain can store 1 petabyte or a quadrillion bytes of information, an unfathomable number. The brain is so incredibly unique, in how it can store all the information with just enough power to run a dim light bulb. Sorry, let me start over. All the brain is so incredibly unique in how it can store all the information with just enough power to run a dim light bulb. And according to a neuroscientist at the Salk Institute in California, contrary, a computer with the same memory would require 1 gigawatt of power, or as they said, basically a whole nuclear power station to run one computer that does what our computer, referring to our brain, does with 20 watts. So if you would like to measure the human brain and computer's intelligence by the capabilities and how efficiently each generator runs to deliver its intelligence, the human brain is arguably at an upper hand. Other interesting facts about the human brain's capabilities are that neurons continue to grow throughout human life. The nervous system transmits messages to the brain at a rate of 180 miles per hour, and it is capable of creating more ideas in comparison to that of the atoms there are in the universe. As I mentioned before, it is capable of storing more memory than the entire internet, and the brain is by some considered one of the most powerful computers with a processing speed of over 3000 gigahertz. Some scientists even consider the brain similar to a quantum computer in theory. Many believe that the brain doesn't stand a chance versus a computer, but as we are researching and learning more about the capability of both entities, we start linking more and more similarities between them. So if you ask me, do you think it is possible to build a computer that is smarter than a human brain? My answer is, I would like to think so, because of the insane rate of that our technology has evolved. I believe that in due time it will be a possibility due to the human race's fixation with technological advancement. But if you ask me if it's possible to build a computer today that is quote unquote smart as smart as a human, personally I tend to lean to the answer no, because there are different ways to measure how smart a person is. One of the best ways to see how analytically smart a person is by testing their score on an IQ test, a test that measures your reasoning, mathematical, language, and problem solving abilities. It is what some psychologists called fluid and crystallized intelligence. Lisa van Gemert, a gifted youth specialist from the American Mensa Group, said, quote, anybody with a very high IQ, they have the ability to manipulate, process, and interpret information at a deeper level and a higher speed than the average person, which is a good indicator for someone's intelligence. But it is not the best way to assess it, as intelligence measures by many things, and only by looking at IQ disregards a person's EQ or emotional intelligence, also a crucial component to a person's intelligence. EQ is the ability to recognize people's emotions and grasp its value and effect on things, as well as to use this information to guide your actions and thinking. EQ is about social and personal competence, including self-awareness, empathy, self-management skills, and it has an important impact on a person's judgment. What separates people with that have a high IQ instead of only that have a high EQ and IQ instead of only IQ is that people with high intelligence on both levels understand others and themselves better, which increases their chances of achieving their goals successfully. An example of a world famous public figure that I'm sure you have all heard of and that I personally looked up to has a noticeably high IQ and a good EQ is Elon Musk. Not only is he analytically gifted with a reported IQ of 155, considered highly gifted in the IQ scale, where he is capable of the problem solving and reasoning abilities required to create his companies, namely SpaceX and Tesla, but he also has the emotional intelligence to have the leadership to the face of his companies while also being a marketing genius using his fame profile and the understanding of people for the gain and success of his company. An example of this is when he live streamed SpaceX launch his personal Tesla Roadsters to space that is now beyond the orbit of Mars. He uses his emotional intelligence to create remarkable publicity stunts that are highly positive marketing wise to his own company. So What are we missing? We have not yet been capable of creating computers with sophisticated emotional intelligence that is even close to having the EQ skills that many humans possess, like for example, self-awareness, empathy, and judgment. And this is why I believe that there is still ways to go to be able to call computers definitely smarter than us. Maybe someday, maybe even possibly in our lifetime, but not in the near future. Um, Today, there is what is called emotion AI, also known as effective computing. Yeah, this is to how far have we come. Its purpose is to detect emotions using AI and can be applicable to numerous industries if successful. This AI technology is able to understand cognitive and emotive channels of human communication. Some of the deep learning research is involving interpretation and response for nonverbal signals, facial recognition, as well as skin temperature and heart rate recognition. So we have AI wearables that are as smart as possible in the near future. Personally, I find it pretty creepy. So here are the prompt questions to answer in the discussion board. How far do you think computers will advance, and will they ever be more intelligent than humans, and do you see that as a threat? And thank you very much. We got some references here.
Thanks so much, Christian. That was really interesting. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Yeah, Jonathan, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Great presentation. I learned a lot from this, actually. So you compared the computer and the brain pretty much by comparing the processing power and the memory storage capabilities. But I do believe that a human brain is vastly more complex than just those two functions, since we have, self-awareness and a will and consciousness, which to this day AI has not been able to achieve yet. And as you mentioned, the brain can store information in 27 different ways or encode it in 27 different ways. And that's also got to do with the structure of the neurons, and a single memory is made up by a pattern of neurons firing and not just a single neuron. So it's not just stored in a bit. So I think there's, many different ways of comparing the intelligence between a computer and a human.
Right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I was getting to that with us having a consciousness with the emotional intelligence part. But yeah, I definitely see what you mean. It's pretty complex. There's definitely many ways to compare the brain with a computer, and we have yet a lot to learn about it.
Mhm.
Is there anything else anyone wants to add? Okay, thank you. That was really good. Lots of information. It was really interesting too. I learned a lot from that, especially on IQ and EQ and all of that. So thank you. Who's going next, Arsan?
Appreciate it.
It's Calvin and Bryn.
Is it cool if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you want to share your screen, Bryn?
Yeah, I'll do it. It says I cannot share while the other participant is sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My bad.
No worries. Oops. Okay. So, am I good to start?
Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Bryn, and today with my partner Calvin, we will be talking about virtual assistants and their applications with machine learning, with a specific focus on the language models that power them. So, what is a virtual assistant? A virtual assistant is essentially an intelligent digital entity built to interface with humans in ways another human companion might. But at the most fundamental level, virtual assistants can be thought of as a tool optimized to function as part of a distributed cognitive system, assisting their human counterparts with completing tasks the system is meant to tackle. So when I say distributed cognitive system, that could be anything as simple as a human with a pen and paper, or a human with a calculator, or two humans. It's just a system where the cognition is split across multiple entities, and virtual assistants are designed and optimized for the system they are put into. So the dual use of virtual assistants in the roles of both social actor on a collaborative team and as a form of technology has been demonstrated as a means of increasing resource efficiency in the workplace. For example, in laboratory settings, there are AI-powered virtual assistants being used to compile and categorize mass amounts of data that a human might not reasonably be able to get through. So capabilities such as natural language processing and speech recognition allow for these kinds of interactions to take place. Data processing and storage in the cloud allow for massive amounts of material transfer between digital entities, and this poses additional efficiency improvements. So henceforth, I'm going to be going on with this definition of virtual assistants. So virtual assistants are AI programs built to augment and/or stand in for human ability in certain tasks. So you can think of them as a speech-based natural user interface. So just to go into a brief history of virtual assistants, the first one ever made came out in 1962. It was made by IBM and considered the first digital intelligence with speech recognition capabilities. It was called Shoebox. It knew 16 words and digits, including the numbers 0 to 9 and the words plus, minus, and total. As you can see on the right, I have a little process of how Shoebox made calculations. But basically what happened is a mathematical problem was read to Shoebox through a microphone, and those words would be translated into electrical impulses within the machine. And this is kind of what we can think of as the input. The measuring circuit within Shoebox would then classify these impulses according to several different sounds before the computation was completed, and the resulting output, aka sum, would be provided via the attached adding machine. And I have a little timeline here just to show where Shoebox kind of came in at 1962, and then about 50 years later when Siri came in, just very fast. And now I'm going to talk about these modern virtual assistants. So modern virtual assistants such as Microsoft Cortana, Amazon Alexa, and Apple Siri function similarly to Shoebox by receiving inputs, generally in spoken word or written text form, and then process them against mass amounts of data, for example, a data set such as ImageNet, in order to provide assistive outputs. The special thing about virtual assistants is the desired output of a virtual assistant should resemble the same type of help and interaction process that a human may have provided. So for example, providing the answer to a question or retrieving requested information in a conversational format. So moving on to how virtual assistants are currently used. In addition to the use of AI and virtual assistants in the entertainment and home sectors, such as in Siri, Alexa, and Cortana, AI in virtual assistant form is notably better than human counterparts at performing extremely repetitive tasks. For example, chatbots providing customer support, like frequently asked questions, industrial manufacturing, and so on. It's also great at amassing and utilizing large amounts of data from storage and assessing it for patterns and statistical relevance a lot better than humans would be able to. So returning back to our definition of virtual assistants as speech-based natural user interfaces, I'm just going to talk a little bit about NLP. So NLP is an all-encompassing term under the branch of AI referring to natural language processing. Rather than simply reading a word and assigning it a basic general and categorical label such as verb or noun, NLP allows virtually assisting AI to understand the denotative meaning of words, which helps with contextualization and personalization of responses and so on. So NLP is critically used in the AIs of mentioned, Siri, Alexa, and Cortana, as well as others, each using their own branded language models to do two things. Firstly, to render sentence structure into a segmented, classifiable format that is computable for the AI system, and secondly, to generate a final meaning from the collective meanings of each individual sentence component. So here's my discussion question. It is, what is the future outlook for virtual assistants? But what I want to focus on specifically is the concerns and research opportunities. And I've put some here, which I find to be most pertinent based on my research. And I'm just going to go through them really quick. So data security, hacking, and malware are concerns for companies who may not have broken into the digital space and who may be bringing virtual assistants onto their rosters. Cybersecurity, hiring, and economical considerations have to be made. Virtual assistant interrogation, for example, Alexa's inability to differentiate between voices when she hears, or it hears, the wake up command. So theoretically, a stranger could say, "Hey Alexa," and then interrogate your Alexa and mine it for personal data. And finally, on this data security branch, let's just pick on Alexa a little bit more, is privacy. So is my virtual assistant listening to my private conversations? Is she relaying it elsewhere? And this actually did happen with Alexa in 2019. The next is level of implementation, and the most outstanding concern here, I think, is occupational security. So what kind of jobs are going to be replaced by virtual assistants, to what degree? In 2021, so this year, it's theorized that a quarter of all digital workers will interact with at least one virtual assistant on a daily basis, so it is definitely a pertinent concern or area of research. And lastly is anthropomorphism. And anthropomorphisms are just human qualities that we project onto non-human entities. So gods, animals, inanimate objects such as virtual assistants. So a question that arises here for me is, how will we interact with human-like non-humanoids at increasing degrees of frequency or requirement? Should we design them to be as aesthetically human as possible? I think an interesting hypothetical case study is the movie Her, where a man literally falls in love with his AI virtual assistant. So yeah, those are my concerns and research opportunities. And now I'm going to hand it over to Calvin to talk a little bit more about language models.
We can understand more about how machine learning opened the doors to the advanced capabilities of virtual assistants by looking at language models. At its core, modern virtual assistants rely on two factors: digital speech recognition technology to comprehend user input, as well as a software model that can output the results and actions by comprehending input. The latter part is where machine learning comes into play, as the goal of the assistant is to be able to respond differently and accurately to different inputs depending on the context, which it does through the algorithm within the language model. A well-trained language model requires large amounts of data to recognize patterns, adapt, and improve. Now, these language models follow this general workflow that many other machine learning models do also follow, that has been discussed in other presentations. Now, the first step is data collection, which ideally involves a large data, a good quality selection. The next step would be training the model with a specific algorithm, which can involve regression techniques or the implementation of an artificial neural network that delves into deep learning. And that applies to most advanced language models nowadays. As the model is being trained, it requires metrics to measure its performance, which is where parameters come in. Parameters are patterns and metrics detected in the model training process that could be used to further fine-tune the desired results. This allows for new data to be taken in, learned, trained, monitored in a more efficient manner. Some of the key model parameters that are usually present in all models are training steps, learning rate, distribution values, and initialization values. A realistic implementation of an advanced language model can be observed in GPT-3, which is a text-generating neural network model developed by OpenAI, a leading artificial intelligence organization. Now, remember that I mentioned that well-trained models involve large quantities of data? I'd like you guys to type in the chat to take a guess at how many how many words has GPT-3 taken just for training examples, like not even for development or use in applications. So just type in like a number range, like thousands, millions. Okay. Okay. So go on to the next slide, Brent. The answer is actually 300 billion. So 300 billion words alone were processed by GPT-3 in the training phase for just one objective at the start, to predict and output the next words, or better yet, the next response to the string of words given. Initially, parameters will also help determine to help the algorithm understand if the predictions it made were accurate or not, and adjust accordingly. So you can see in the animation, like the word "a robot must." The GPT-3 was responsible for predicting the next word. So there would be an array of possibilities, and depending on the parameter, it would basically tell the model if the output was right or in the right direction, in the right or wrong direction, and the model take that as a parameter. And during this training process, GPT-3 developed 175 billion unique parameters to determine the output depending on the input. And just to reiterate, all these parameters are utilized to help determine the output depending on the context. And these parameters are also used to further train and develop the model itself, since it's really a never-ending process. Keep in mind that although commercial virtual assistants use advanced language models that rely on natural language processing systems, GPT-3 really stands in its own league. GPT-3 is so far in advance as a language model that it can even write stories, blog articles, PR materials, and even technical documentation. Brent, can you move on to the next slide? Yeah, which is something that humans may even struggle to write in detail. In fact, GPT-3 is even capable of holding an interview with a human through conversation. You might be wondering how language models might be used in a practical application, like a virtual assistant. This is done by setting up an API that connects the language model to the interface, which could be a assistant, a chatbot, or even an auto-completion feature. Next slide, please. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is the intermediary system that connects the service that a customer to use, as well as with the language model itself. Now, even though the top virtual systems in the world don't rely on a language model as advanced as GPT-3, the language models that they use are still flexible and intelligent enough to understand the context of user speech, able to do different tasks such as setting a time in the calendar, messages, opening, checking messages, and searching the web. Keep in mind that the most utilized virtual assistants in the world, like Alexa, Siri, and Google, are owned by the largest tech companies in the world that have access to a large amount of user data that can be used for these companies' own language models. Now, moving on to the next slide is my question for discussion, is that do you see a future where advanced language models will be able to create original material, such as like blogs, documents, and in turn even replacing humans in this process? And also these language models, once well-trained, would have a much larger understanding of specific topics due to its seemingly infinite access to data from the internet, as well as user input.
And here are our references for our presentation.
Hey, thank you so much. That was really good. Jerry, do you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I just want to look at talk about the question a little bit. I think that question is super interesting in terms of looking at programs where you do things like literature reviews or like medical studies or kind of just honestly these like clinical studies in general. Having worked on some of them myself, if you had AIs who could literally just compile all this data and pump out interpretations and write it out for you, and you have people, you don't need people to do this anymore, and you can just save so much time. I think in terms of the creative aspect, I'm not sure how long into the future that would be, but I think that in terms of a more straightforward data analysis, maybe writing a paper, that kind of thing, it would be a lot sooner than we actually expect. So.
Yeah, for sure. I see a couple interesting comments as well. If the group wants to address them. Oh, I see you guys typing back in the chat. Okay, cool. Does anyone want to add anything else, or should we move on? No, we're good. Okay, great job, guys. That was really good. Arson, let's get in one more presentation, and then we can take a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back.
Yeah. So next is Maha and Ravi.
Yep. Okay. I'll share my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, let's get started. My name is Maha, and my partner is Raveen, and we'll be covering artificial intelligence in agriculture.
So agriculture industry plays a crucial role in country's economy as it provides the main source of food, income, as well as employment opportunities to various rural populations. With the advent of automation, the first industrial revolution introduced a fundamental shift in the society with a push towards other careers. The 20th and 21st century has seen increasing urbanization with the potential domestic workforce for agriculture rapidly declining. Therefore, reducing the human resources that farm requires is vital in sustaining the future for agriculture. Potential applications of artificial intelligence or AI, like the ones that we are going to discuss today, can help support the agriculture industry. By analyzing data through artificial intelligence in order to improve animal and crop yield and to improve resources efficiency, we can theoretically reduce the estimated required human labor. So before we dive right into the topic, I would like to ask everyone that is present over here in the chat to put down in the comments what applications of AI in agriculture are you already aware of? And it could be anything. All right.
Okay, so this is our topic outline. We're going to be covering surveillance, optimization of crop yields, and livestock healthcare. Next. Okay, let's start off with autonomous surveillance. Just go next. Okay, so machine learning can be used in surveillance systems to monitor live video feeds for intruders, human or otherwise. And one company that offers video analytic technologies is 2020 Solutions. They train neural networks to identify unusual activity, objects, and track equipment location. Next. Okay, so we're just going to examine one aspect of the surveillance system, facial recognition, a bit further. There are four main steps to facial recognition technology. The first is facial detection, locating the face in the image or video. Then the second is facial alignment, normalizing the facial geometry to be consistent with faces in the database. The third is feature extraction, extracting features from the face to use in recognition. And through deep learning, convolutional neural networks figure out the necessary features themselves. We'll expand on this further in a moment. All right, and then the last one is facial recognition itself, using the unique features and measurements to match the face against one in the database. Next. Okay, so deep learning is a network of stacked neural layers. It's a system of clustering and classification layers to group data based on similarities amongst labeled exampled inputs. A single image or video snapshot can contain thousands of pixel inputs. Networks classify features or patterns by attaching weights to specific inputs to describe input importance and feature classification. Each node can be considered as measuring for a specific feature. It takes a summation of product of input and weight to determine how active that feature is. And you can kind of see a single node process right here. Next. Okay, so nodes for one layer can be considered inputs for the next, with their own weights defining their own activeness for the next set of features. Theoretically, each layer trains on a distinct set of features based on the previous layer. And each layer is thus increasing levels of abstraction, from edges to eyes to faces. Unlike traditional machine learning, manual feature identification is unnecessary. And during training, networks also use something called a cost function, which uses the gradient of the actual and expected output to determine how to adjust the weight to find the most accurate output. Next. Okay, and this is kind of an example of the increasing levels of abstraction. You have the raw data, it identifies the low-level features, it uses that to identify the mid-level features, and then it goes to the high-level features. Next. Okay, so why is it important? Security guards are usually required to watch multiple CCTV cameras at once. And due to fluctuating attention span and fatigue from the same monotonous activity on a large number of video feeds, the chance of missing unusual activity is high. Furthermore, since criminals usually wear facial disguises to avoid recognition, catching them after the fact is highly difficult. In fact, CCTV often fails to be a useful deterrent. In a 2008 study of 68 CCTV cameras in San Francisco, there was no statistical significant change in violent crime in a 500-foot range around the cameras. Deep learning surveillance systems have a higher chance of identifying security breaches and problems, allowing for personnel to resolve the problem at a practical time. Next. Right, so there's still a lot of challenges with video surveillance. The first, camera quality. If you have low light or low definition, it can cause issues in image recognition. And then the second is transmission issues. So it requires a consistent network. Weak networks, especially with wireless linking, causes transmission issues and interferes with the system itself. And then we have high false alarm rate. So systems that depend more so on motion detection can have a higher false alarm rate, and it can be triggered unnecessarily by the wind or even the glare of the sun. And then the last one, and this is the most important, context. Machine learning can't analyze human actions. For example, if a person is running, it can't tell why they're running. Maybe they've stolen a chicken or they're just late to their job. Okay, next.
So optimizing crop yield is another important AI application that we are going to discuss today. There are two main methods that are involved, yield mapping and pest control. So yield mapping is the first. So yield mapping is a process of collecting georeference data on crop yield and moisture content while said crop is being harvested. Data sensors can be placed on machines like combine harvesters, and then using yield maps and soil conditions, data in the combination with the help of machine learning, soil yields for a given crop can be determined. This is valuable for crop planning to optimize crop yield. That is, it lets farmers know which crop area is best for which plant. Other data like fertilizers and natural nutrients levels can also be collected from in-ground sensors. In combination with soil yields maps, this data pinpoints how much fertilizer and additional nutrients would be necessary to optimize specific plant growth. Notably, a minimum of 5 years of maps are required in order to avoid unusual weather effects from spoiling possible conclusions. Now we're going to talk about genetic feature selections. So a large part of the agriculture industry includes breeding plants with the highest yielding genetics. So however, genotype information can have thousands of millions of markers for each plant type, but in the 2018 Syngenta Crop Challenge, Syngenta released large data sets containing 8 years of genotype. There was also environmental and yield data of 2,267 maize hybrids across 2,247 locations across US and Canada. It required participants to predict the future of hybrid performance. The winning team showed deep learning could be used to predict the complex relationships between genes, environmental conditions, and crop yields. The model could be also used in order to genetically select crop features for new hybrids in various environments to optimize yield. This is also vital for firms to make informed financial and management decisions when purchasing new crops. Knowledge of new crops or crop yield and also the quality helps firms negotiate the best price for harvest, saving them millions of dollars annually.
All right, so another factor to maintaining and optimizing crop yield is pest management. A paper by the Food and Agriculture Organization in the UN showed AI can predict pest infestations using drones and in-ground sensors. By predicting infestations ahead of time, a reduced volume of crop is lost. Okay, so normalized difference vegetation index, or NDVI. is a fundamental part of pest management. It's created using multispectral and hyperspectral aerial imaging. So plants reflect near infrared light, as you can see in the diagram. The more stressed or dehydrated a plant, the less NRI is reflected. Using this principle, NDVI can provide information about different biomasses and general plant health, water stress and water access, pest infestations, and nutrient deficiencies. Drones with their agile maneuvering and ability to hover are ideal for NI imaging of large areas quickly. Next. Okay, so NR imaging can be done manually for single plants, but deep learning is required to extract and process larger image data sets. And we're just going to sum this up in 5 steps. Image stitching, crop identification, crop counting, phenotype analysis, and health mapping. And we can kind of see health mapping or productivity mapping is one of the examples on the side, the image, and we can see how the red areas identify those crops are growing beautifully and well, high productivity. And the green area is a bit lower in productivity, so they might need more nutrients or water. Next. Okay, and then this image is a disease and pest incident map, and it's used by identifying the stress a plant is having. So green means no plant stress, so that's great, no pest problems. Red areas or orange areas mean that there might be stress happening to the plants. We might have to look for pests in those areas. Next. All right, so why does it matter? So marketing and financial activities for agricultural firms, including crop distribution, equipment, commercial plans, all have to be determined beforehand. So deep learning increases revenue by not only maximizing yield, but also providing firms with accurate volume calculations they can use for price determination. Furthermore, with the environmental impacts of climate change, identifying the relationship between the change in climate and weather and the nutrient and water requirements a plant might need is becoming increasingly important. Next.
So one of the many applications for AI in the agriculture industry is livestock healthcare and their welfare. Monitoring livestock's health, including vital signs, daily activities level, and food intake ensures their health and is known to be one of the most fastest growing aspects of AI and machine learning in agriculture. The one that I will be discussing today in the application of machine learning and AI is called precision livestock technologies. So precision livestock technologies or farming, which is also known as PLF, also known as precision animal management, uses artificial intelligence and machine vision to deliver data in order to boost production, increase quality, and improve animal well-being. It is a smart technology that enables individual animals to be monitored more closely on farms that continues to upscale the size of their operation. So in simple terms, the precision livestock farming system is an automated healthcare check station for animals. For example, for beef farmers, it is difficult to control and keep track of large herds. Therefore, this AI technology aims to replace subjective impressions with objective data based on facts and figures. Farmers can also set up this system in open pastures, providing animals with free range. But how does that work? So there are 4 basic steps for this process. So step 1, when the animal walks onto the precision livestock farming system platform, just shown as in the figure on the right, the sensors measure the animal's weight. So step 2, so then this information is then transmitted to the field box, that is a field that takes in all the signals from all the various sensors and converts them into accurate information for the bot system, which in return identifies animal by specific radio frequency. Step 3, all the information is sent to the farm box via an external antenna. The local server or the farm box are located in the farm office or depending on where the farmer wants to receive the signals. And then the last step, step 4, is that the box processes all the data and communicates with the cloud where the system's intelligence is located, providing further details about the animal's health. So hence this technology provides more than just the information on how much an animal weighs. Farmer also needs to know whether an animal is healthy or unhealthy, as poor appetite is a symptom of many ailments. Therefore, constant monitoring of each animal through this technology enables farmers to spot diseases early on in the animals and successfully treat them. So now we are going to talk about different types of potential challenges in agriculture. Okay, so the first one is disruption of a vulnerable workforce. So with increased imaging and surveillance required to defend and optimize farms, it is a likely possibility that surveillance may be expanded intrusively to farm employees and to monitor attentiveness and their productivity. Workplace surveillance has been proven to cause mental health stress and also promote toxicity in workplace. An analysis by anthropologists Michael and Sally conclude that surveillance creates a culture where people more often alter their behavior in order to suit machines and work with them. And then it has eroded conceptions of agencies. Furthermore, 20% of the agriculture employment consists of migrant workers. While they are on temporary visas, they often fill long-term positions. Additionally, although they are protected by the same labor rights as citizens, their precarious immigrant status makes exercising those rights inaccessible. This provides employers incentive to reduce cost, resulting in increasing cases of substandard living conditions and other human rights concerns.
All right, so technology can be hacked or tampered with. We all know this. Therefore, as dependency on technology increases, so do cybersecurity risks. And we've listed some of the risks below. So disruption of ventilation and feeding system to animals, control of pesticide and dispersal systems to poison crops, access of surveillance videos to unauthorized users, and then tampering of food identification system data to be able to sell spoiled or sick food to the public. That's a worst case scenario. Okay, next. And we just want to, on that last point, consider before you leave how access to other data agriculturally could aid in commercial espionage and what you think is the worst case scenario. Thank you for listening.
These are our citations.
Okay, great job, guys. I thought that was a really unique topic related to AI. It was really interesting. I also loved how you guys used some great visuals. It really helped me understand what you guys were talking about through the whole presentation. That was really good. Does anyone have anything to add? Possibly answer their question? Do you guys want to just put your question up just so they could see it?
Ravine, share your screen again. I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay. I see people commenting in the chat. I think it was
I really like your take on this, Carl. Just reading the chat stuff. It could definitely be used by foreign powers to cripple our food production. That is a really big problem with letting AI take a big part of our industry.
Anyone want to add anything else? If not, we can go to the break. No, going once, going twice. Okay. Yeah, guys, that was really good. That was a really good presentation. Thank you so much. Now let's take our break, 10-minute break. I'll see you guys back here at 7:37, and then we'll pick up where we left off. We've got 4 presentations left, and we'll be good. So I'll see you guys in 10 minutes.
Henry and Hussein, are you guys here?
Yeah, it's just me. My partner didn't respond to me, so it's just me.
That's fine. Or you could present whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'll start. So hi, everyone. My name is Henry. Today, I'm just going to be going over how machine learning is used in finance and what that means for us as a society moving forward. So the agenda for today is just a quick introduction, followed by a historical overview of machine learning. Then I'll go over some of the current day uses of machine learning in finance specifically. After that, I'll just talk about some of the problems and future implications of this, and then I'll wrap it up with discussion questions and a quick recap. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Henry. I'm going to be going in my 4th year of commerce here at McMaster. I'm passionate about technology, and so when I saw this course was being offered, it's something that obviously interested me. And as a business student who loves tech, you can kind of see where the inspiration for my topic came from. So I hope you guys learned something from this, and I hope to learn a lot from the rest of your guys' presentations as well. So moving on to the main part of this presentation, machine learning. So by now, we all have a pretty good grasp of what machine learning is. So I won't go too in depth into the definition, but from the lectures, machine learning can be defined as, quote, a branch of artificial intelligence concerned with the design and development of algorithms that allow computers to evolve behaviors based on empirical data. And so what that just means is basically machines can take data, and through algorithms, they will use that information to make better decisions while continuously learning or improving themselves to become more accurate and effective without the help of human intervention. So just going over some history, some interesting things. Dating back to 1950, the grandfather of AI, Alan Turing, asked the question, how can machines think? And so this sparked the idea that machines may be capable of thinking and learning similar to humans, hence the term machine learning. And as we progress through history, this question's kind of been answered already. And so we move more towards human-like AI. The question shifts from can machines think to what differentiates human thinking from machine thinking. And we already saw a presentation on that. It was really well done. So yeah, so in 1952, Arthur Samuel, a machine learning researcher, famously wrote the first computer learning program. He was responsible for the IBM computer that progressively got better at checkers the more it played. And this fits the definition of machine learning as we talked about earlier, where machines are constantly improving themselves the more they repeat a function and they gain new information. Just one thing to note, keep IBM and computers playing games in the back of your mind as I go through this history. It's something that pops up several times and you'll notice that as we go through it. So moving on to 1967, the nearest neighbor algorithm was created, which allowed computers to begin using pattern recognition. The algorithm was most famously used for solving the traveling salesperson problem. I'm not sure if anyone's aware of the problem, but it's basically just an optimization problem where you have to create the shortest path for a traveling salesperson. And the goal is to travel to each city within an area in the shortest amount of distance. So like the shortest path. Obviously, that's just a simplification of the problem. But the main takeaway here is that pattern recognition is beginning to be used by computers. And so in 1981, explanation-based learning was implemented. Explanation-based learning is when a computer analyzes data and then creates a general rule for which it can follow by removing unimportant data. This in turn allows machines to continuously improve and become more accurate in their outputs. This is similar to semi-supervised learning, where machines are given labeled data, they create an algorithm, and then they can use that to sort, classify, and analyze the unlabeled data. And so moving on to the 1990s, that's when the third industrial revolution took place. And as we know from our lectures, the end of the 20th century saw what we now call the digital revolution. We saw the introduction of things such as big data, digital computers, even things like 3D printing. And in terms of machine learning, this meant that scientists began creating programs and algorithms for machines to analyze and make decisions based on this new data rather than their knowledge-driven approaches of the past. So big data and its analysis is critical, specifically for the finance industry, and I'll show you why in a couple of slides here. And just to round out the century, in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue was the first computer to beat a world champion in chess. Again, it's been talked about a lot throughout the week, so I won't go too in depth. However, it was obviously a pivotal moment in the history of machine learning. And so again, like I said earlier, in 1952, IBM creates a machine capable of playing checkers. And now we have in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue playing chess. So you can kind of see that progression going from a simple game like checkers to a more complex game like chess, and continue to look out for the trend as we move into more recent history. So in 2006, Geoffrey Hinton rebranded neural networks under the name deep learning in order to explain how algorithms could allow computers to distinguish objects and text in images and videos. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with those CAPTCHA boxes websites will sometimes ask you to fill out. So this is basically what machines are doing when they're trying to identify objects in text. And so we're helping them do so when we fill out those forms. Deep learning is a branch of AI and machine learning that uses neural networks to process data, create patterns, and make decisions similar to how the human brain works. So if you remember earlier about what Alan Turing asked if machines can think like humans, you'll see that as we're progressing through history, machines are becoming very similar to human thinking. And so in 2011, IBM is back with yet another computer capable of completing human tasks. This time it was Watson, and it was capable of playing and winning against other humans in Jeopardy. So Watson was a machine designed to answer questions and respond to command using what's now known as natural processing language. This technology is now used in things like chatbots and virtual assistants. If you guys want to download my slide deck after the presentation, I've linked a video to the actual Jeopardy match between IBM's Watson and real humans. I think you guys should all just take a look at it. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty fun to watch. And if not, if you don't want to download the slide deck, you guys can just search it up on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, in 2012, Google developed their machine learning algorithm that we now know as the YouTube's recommended algorithm. So that's what's responsible for recommending you videos based on previous interests, as well as videos being watched by people with similar interests as you. And then in 2014, Facebook developed DeepFace, which is an algorithm capable of recognizing human faces with photos. And this has gone on to be used all throughout Facebook and other social media platforms. Building upon deep learning, as we talked about before, AI is becoming increasingly more capable of human actions. And to some, it can be worrying just how human-like machines are becoming. Lastly, in 2016, AlphaGo became the first computer program to defeat a professional human Go player, the first to defeat a Go world champion, and according to some, it's the strongest Go player in history. Now, Go is considered the hardest classical game for AI to handle due to the massive amounts of outcomes and its complex nature. However, as machine learning and AI have advanced over the decades, AlphaGo is able to achieve this milestone in AI technology. And as we get to the end of the timeline here, it's pretty funny to see how we started off with IBM's checkers machine, moving on to chess, then we get to Jeopardy, and now we're wrapping it up with what's considered the most complex board game we have so far. So it's just pretty interesting to see that progression over time. So now that we are now that we've gone through the history of machine learning, let's take a look at some of the current use cases of machine learning today, specifically in the finance industry. So in finance, there are typically 5 categories of use for machine learning. The first of these applications is something called algorithmic trading, and it's as simple as its name suggests. Traders will use a program that follows a set algorithm in order to place a trade. And because this trading is done by a computer, it can buy and or sell at speeds and volumes a normal human can't possibly accomplish. Hopefully, it results in a nice little profit for the traders there. As we mentioned before, through machine learning, computers are capable of taking an input and acting on it without the intervention of humans. And in this case, the systems will follow its algorithm and make the best possible trades based on factors such as pricing, quantity, and timing. Algorithmic trading is it's pretty straightforward from an end user's perspective. However, it may not be as easy to implement as you think. In paper, it sounds pretty easy. It sounds just like free money, basically. Just tell your computer, hey, follow this program and let's make some money. But the problem with that is coming up with the right algorithm to use. And there's millions and countless different strategies and algorithms that you can come up with no real guarantee that any of them will yield any profit. Thus, we're not yet there where AI can completely take over trading 100% by itself. So we still do need some sort of human expertise involved just to ensure everything's running smoothly. But again, it's a super useful tool. So the second use case of machine learning in finance is security, specifically fraud detection. So as technology progresses, we have seen an increase in security thanks to machine learning's ability to more accurately detect and prevent fraud. Through monitoring, detecting, and flagging suspicious activity, banks are able to more accurately prevent most cases from ever occurring. Similar to how Gmail can sort out and detect spam mail, financial security algorithms check if each attempted activity is characteristic of the particular user in order to prevent fraud. So the system compares activity to other factors of the user, such as things like the location, the amount, IP address, account history, things like that, in order to see if the action is in line with the person using it or if it's potential fraudulent activity that needs to be flagged. So these machines are constantly analyzing large data sets to detect unique activities or anomalies to flag for further investigation. So moving on to the third case here, we have something called robo-advisors. So a robo-advisor is an online platform that allows users to invest with ease and convenience. So a user basically just puts their budget and their risk tolerance in the system in order to give the advisor an idea for what they would like to accomplish. And then the advisor will then provide financial information as well as create a portfolio to fit the customer's needs. So the robo-advisor works similar to like a human advisor, except for there's no potential for human error. And you have the benefit of having highly optimized information in real time. Aside from the initial input and funding, the robo-advisor requires very little to no human input after it's done its initial screening. So it's low maintenance and it's very easy for beginner investors to use. Additionally, robo-investors are generally inexpensive, and this plus the ease of use makes them very accessible for anyone really to use. So in Canada, we have Wealthsimple, which I would recommend to anyone who's interested in investing and doesn't know really where to start. It's a pretty good and helpful app that will help you get started on that investment journey. So moving on to the fourth case, credit scoring and loan underwriting. So credit scoring and loan underwriting is just when the bank determines if you're eligible for a loan or not. So now through the benefit of technology, banks are able to utilize machine learning in order to determine lendees' eligibility. So banks will store enormous amounts of customer information, and with machine learning, this can be sorted and analyzed in order to make informed decisions on the bank's behalf. So the algorithms will look through customer data such as things like age, income, occupation, if they have previous credit history, and things like that in order to detect the likelihood of them defaulting on their loan. And a side note, insurance companies also do this as well. They look through consumer data to kind of predict the likelihood of you having to actually take out the insurance money. So I took a statistics course a couple, I think 2 years ago. And so insurance was a big example there. So if anyone's taking a stats course, I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. But again, it just goes to show how important data is and how powerful it really is to both consumers and institutions like banks. And so the last and fifth use case is probably the most common application of machine learning. It's called process automation. And it's basically just replacing repetitive, menial, expensive tasks that are often completed by humans or even outsourced. It's replacing that with AI through the help of machine learning. So this is mainly done to cut down on costs while improving speed and efficiency of these processes. Some common examples of this would include things like chatbots or automated call centers. So if you've ever been on a website and had a pop-up asking you to ask it a question, that's a chatbot. And they take advantage of machine learning and natural language processing in order to analyze customer requests and provide accurate information. If you remember earlier in the timeline, I talked about IBM's Watson machine playing Jeopardy and using natural language processing. This is basically a further development of that. So it's pretty interesting to see how we're progressing as we go along. Yeah, so moving on to some problems and concerns with machine learning in finance. Although there's a lot of different uses for machine learning, there's still some problems and concerns regarding it. Firstly, there's the potential for poor quality data in the data sets. So when you rely so heavily on data, you're at the risk of falling victim to bad data. And this is something that's not exclusive to the finance industry. As we saw earlier in someone's presentation about AI in the workplace and there being biased data. So yeah, it's not exclusive to the finance industry. However, when you have such an important reliance on data, any trader or bank can stand to lose a lot of money should they have poor, incorrect, or biased data. Additionally, there's also the risk of false negatives. A false negative in terms of machine learning is just when the machine identifies a pattern that doesn't actually exist. So think along the lines of correlation does not equal causation. This can be detrimental, again, to those relying on things like robo-advisors or algorithmic trading. There's the potential, if there's identified a problem pattern that doesn't exist, obviously you stand to lose a lot of money that way. Another concern for those relying on machine learning is the potential for a server outage. So whether that's due to technical issues or something a little more sinister like a cyber attack. So let's say you're an algorithm trader with $30,000 invested and then the server goes down. If something happens in the market where you would have normally wanted to sell there, but you're physically unable to sell, now you're missing out on potential profits. And should your stock dip, now you're in a loss, right? And there's nothing really you can do about that. So again, that's another downside to that. One concern that came up that has more to do so with society in general rather than just investors or bankers is the monetization of data. So as data becomes increasingly more valuable, companies have realized they can make a lot of money off of it, and therefore we're now dealing with even our own data being used against us in order to make us spend more money. So this has to do more so with social media and targeted ads and marketing. However, it still falls under the business and finance umbrella. So I just wanted to bring that up. And with that, I kind of want to ask a question. Now that you guys I'm sure a lot of us are aware how our data is being tracked and used against us to try to spend more money. How comfortable are we still using social media to that extent, right? Like, there's a downside. You're being tracked. Companies are not really in it for the sake of being wholesome, but they're just in it to make money, and they'll track you and target ads just so you can spend more money. How comfortable are we using social media? So you don't have to write it down or pop into the discussion. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Yeah, as data becomes important, companies are going to find ways to make money. That's the way business is now. So moving on to future implications. So I talked about the past and the present so far. I'd just like to go over some of my ideas for the future and what this could mean for our society and specifically our generation as we continue to live through the progression of technology. Personally, I believe that with the advancement of machine learning in finance, we're looking towards a more financially literate society. So as technology progresses and makes things such as investing easier to understand and undertake, I believe this to be the case. Finances are beginning to be no longer considered taboo. Financial education is no longer gatekept by the wealthy and those with access to it. I mentioned Wealth Simple and robo-advisors being great tools for beginners to get their foot in the door with finances and investing. And with this, I hope to see our generation help tackle the economic disparity, not just within our own country, but like globally as well. So no longer are banks the only ones with access to data. Data is becoming more and more accessible and available to use. Hopefully our generation takes advantage of that. And in addition to this, it's also possible that we will begin to see more accurate and effective algorithms for understanding our economic markets. One of the disadvantages of algorithmic trading that I mentioned earlier was the complexity or like how hard it is to actually come up with the right algorithms to use. So as we advance, perhaps these algorithms will become easier to understand and hopefully they won't be as hard to come up with. There's also room for more innovation in consumer-friendly products, such as virtual financial assistants. So we already have Siri, but what if we had something like a Siri plus a robo-advisor? So you could ask Siri, what's the weather? But you could also ask, hey, Siri, I need some help with my portfolio. I want to diversify. So just things like that could, I could see that becoming a product very soon. I could see that coming up very soon in our timeline. And lastly, I didn't really talk about it, but in this presentation, but cryptocurrency is huge right now. And there's a lot of room for machine learning to be integrated in. I know it's already there, so further developed there as well. So that could be its own presentation, to be honest. And just to wrap things up, I mentioned a couple negatives. I can open the floor up, or I don't know how we're doing on time, but if you guys want to respond in the discussions, is there any negatives you guys could think of that I missed or maybe you don't agree with? And in addition to that, future implications as well. Did you agree with me? If not, what are some ideas that you guys have? I'd love to hear from you. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for listening. And then those are my sources. And I'll just leave this up for now.
John has something to say.
Yeah, so just when we're talking about the negatives, also kind of had a question, if not to add on to that. But we know how like insider trading and everything is illegal.
Yep.
Do you think like the fines should be greater if AI is used? Maybe it's a ridiculous like comparison, but I'm thinking like assault with a deadly weapon is worse than just assault. And
You're
maybe
right.
this could work to dissuade like immoral usage of AI.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of interesting how you pose that question, like assault versus assault with a deadly weapon. So insider trading versus insider trading with not a deadly weapon, but like advanced AI or even more inside information, right? So yeah, I definitely think there should be laws put in place and stricter punishments to sort of dissuade people from engaging in that kind of activity. So yeah, that's a good question. I agree with that. I agree
Appreciate it.
Ma?
All right, so it's just like AI and the stock market don't seem like a very great idea. Like in terms of making money, yeah.
Mhm.
But if you have a large percentage of people depending on AI while they're investing, I mean, I'm just thinking like if you have competing AI with different data sets, could they make each other defunct? I mean, could it cause strange temporary growth spikes in stocks, maybe reduce investments in newer stocks? And it feels like maybe if we have too many people using AI, it could cause the entire stock market to fall apart.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I was thinking about that as well when I was doing my research. Firstly, AI is already being used, whether we know it or not. A lot of the hedge funds, the top hedge funds, are already engaged in AI, and it's not so much AI. Like I mentioned, algorithmic trading. So you set up an algorithm and it'll trade for you, but it's more so analyzing the data that's available and making informed decisions based on that. But to your point about how we shouldn't all rely heavily on it, otherwise it's basically just going to be computers fighting computers, and it can cause like some unnatural growth or some bad swings. I don't know. We kind of got to see how it goes and how it plays out, because I mean, at this point, it's inevitable, right? Unless laws are put in place, there's not really any ways we can kind of stop people from using the technology that's available, right? So from my point of view, I think it should just be available to everyone. I don't think it should be limited to people with money or people who have the knowledge of it, or large corporations that can afford to buy these large data sets. I think it should just be available to everyone. And I don't know, we really just got to see how it plays out.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. Like I totally agree with you. Like we can't have it if if one person's gonna use it, everyone's should be allowed to use it, right?
And
But
our
then,
market's just gonna
but like if you have like these massive banks, I think someone talked about this in the comments, but you have these massive banks and companies, and I think we've noticed now, especially with the 2007 recession, some of these companies have the entire economy on their backs. If they make a mistake with the AI, or if they mess up with the stock market in any way, I mean, there goes our country.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the GameStop thing and the whole, I think they called like the millennial crash or whatever, where basically people were like using social media to sway the markets and stuff and take down hedge funds. I mean, I was reading an article about how AI was, people were saying, could AI have foreseen that? And would people who were using AI have been able to get on that train beforehand, or would have just been purely human intervention? And the answer was kind of vague. So basically what they were saying is nobody can predict the stock market, right? You can try to use historical data, but at the end of the day, nobody knows what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. It's terrifying to think about it, but that's the society we live in. That's what we live in. So I guess that's what I was saying about the point. I'm interested to see how our generation tackles the problems that previous generations didn't have. But yeah, that was a really good question. Really good points.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a very good presentation. Especially a good discussion as well, and especially like connecting it to your program as well, right? The commerce and even the so that's a good job. We're gonna move on. So the next group we have is Benjamin and Bilal. Guys here?
Yeah, we are.
All right. You can present whenever you're ready.
Bilal, you ready? You good? Bilal, are you there?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. All right, let's go to the first slide.
Sorry, 1 second.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We won't take too much of your time. So today, Bilal and I will be presenting the topic of machine learning in virtual personal assistants. So before we start this presentation, I'll start off with a quick question for all of you guys. So when you think of virtual personal assistants, what are the first things that come to mind? You just type your answer in the chat or yell it out loud. Alexa, Siri. All right, so most of the Android or mobile HomePods. All right, got it. So annoying Cortana that gets, all right. So these are the topics we'll be just covering in today's presentation. So I'll start off with a quick intro to machine learning and how machine learning is linked to personal assistants in today's landscape. Then Bilal will share with you guys some of the machine learning assistants used in our everyday lives that is not only limited to our daily life convenience, but also relevant in the health, tourism, and security sector. Both of us will be going through the pros and cons of machine learning in assistance. And finally, Bilal will conclude our presentation and I'll discuss the discussion question. So let's get started. So I'm sure all of you guys actually listen to the lecture podcast and are familiar with machine learning. So I'll briefly go over this slide. So machine learning is a subset or branch of artificial intelligence that focuses on the use of data and algorithms to imitate the way humans learn while continuously improving its accuracy. So in the last decade, we've seen the rapid upcoming of machine learning introduced in our lives, which is now pretty much integrated in our daily routine life cycles. We're now seeing it used more in our homes, school, and at work. Moving on. So we see the picture here, Siri, Alexa, Google Assistants. Here are some of the cool features that these virtual assistants have. So they have the ability to recognize voice commands, get to know your habits and preferences while learning over time, and are accessible to you hands-free. So if your hands are tied up, say, for example, you overslept and you're rushing to go to campus. You got a cup of coffee in one hand, textbooks in the other. You want to tell your assistants to close the door and turn off the lights on your way out without having them to do anything. That's what virtual assistants can do. So these virtual personal assistants are available and can be lifesavers when you're in a hurry. Now, according to the research and consultant firm OVA, there are nearly 7.5 billion active devices with virtual assistants. Half of them are located in Asia, and Google makes up about a quarter of the market share. Now, there are two different types of AI assistants. The one we're most familiar with, virtual assistants, are task-oriented that can complete simple home and administrative tasks. So let's say turn off your lights, setting reminders, and then providing the weather. And then we have these smart advisors, which are subject-oriented and are much more complex. So for example, smart advisors can enable an organization to automatically identify employees with the highest and lowest performance costs. So evidently, we are seeing virtual assistants and smart advisors used at home and work, and it's crazy. So I'll now pass it on to Bilal, who will be going over some examples of machine learning and assistants used in our everyday lives.
Thank you, Ben. So one of the examples of the uses of machine learning and assistants is virtual personal assistants. These are the ones that we usually know. These are the common ones. These are Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, so on. They come in either devices form or softwares, and they connect to the Wi-Fi and the other smart devices in the home. They do that to provide two main functions. The first one is finding information, and as Ben mentioned, one of their best features is the voice command. So you can just ask a question to Siri, for example, "Hey Siri, how's the weather today?" Or you can ask them, "What's the scores of a certain game?" Or "Are there any available flights from this place to this place on this date?" And they will check the web and give you the answer. The other function of these devices are to execute commands using the same feature, which is the same function, which is voice command. You can ask these devices to, for example, book an appointment at this place, or call someone, or set an alarm. Another use of these devices is in security. So AI surveillance is widely spreading, as it's proven to be more efficient. So instead of having one person watching over 6 screens and having a possibility of him missing something, we have AI to do that for us. Not only that, but it can prevent incidents before they even happen by observing the different cameras and sensors and reporting suspicious behavior to the human representative. And by that, there is a possibility of preventing dangerous incidents before they even happen. AI also protects us from scams and viruses, especially through our emails, by detecting malicious emails and filtering it to our spam for us to review it then if it's dangerous or no. Another example of ML in the assistance field is the medical field. So one of the uses is to monitor health performance using some devices such as Fitbits or smartwatches that, for example, measure our heartbeat or our sleep quality. These are very especially beneficial for people with long-term diseases or recovering from certain injuries, as they collect data and send it to doctors for further analysis and review. Not only that, but robotic assistance is a rising one and in the medical field, and has solved many problems. Especially one of the examples is, for example, surgical robotic hands. Instead of having the doctor's hand, these robotic hands are more stable, more precise, and decrease the room for error in an area where error can be fatal, such as surgeries. AI has also appeared in businesses through marketing, for example, as AI identifies customers' preferences and tailors advertisements and products accordingly to attract as many people with their preferences to the business. Also, we see AI in customer service through chatbots, which are rising rapidly right now, especially since they can sometimes solve the issue without human representatives or intervention, which saves time, money, and satisfies all parties. Finally, we see it in communication. Today, You can use an app to translate your conversation with someone who speaks a different language on the spot instead of having a physical interpreter or with you guys. This decreases the language barriers and increases the communication. These were just a few examples. There are many, as we said, and I'm gonna pass it on to Ben to tell us some of the pros of using machine learning in assistance.
All right, thanks, Paul. So looking at the pros of virtual assistants, as I mentioned earlier, virtual assistants are readily available 24/7. So whether it's early in the morning or late at night, they're always ready to help. So they can increase your productivity, flexibility, and work quality. So these virtual assistants can assist you in the smallest way that can save up tremendous amounts of time and can cut out all incoming notifications and distractions to increase productivity. And lastly, these virtual assistants can personalize with you as they are always learning and improving. So just a quick fun story. I was actually one of the beta testers for the Google Assistant back in 2016. So at the time, Google didn't have their own virtual assistant, and Apple Siri was dominating the market, while Samsung Bixby was actually making its debut later that year. So back then, I actually had to type out my commands on a special messaging app called Google Allo, and I've actually noticed a lot of bugs. So one thing I did remember was I asked for the weather of my city, which was Markham, and it actually gave me the weather for Markham, Illinois, in the United States in Fahrenheit. So as the months gone by, I actually sent my feedback to Google, and I actually noticed a lot of updates rolling out throughout the weeks. So they finally introduced voice command, and they were actually one of the first to have a two-way experience with the user. So I remember asking, how tall is the prime minister? And of course, that's Justin Trudeau. And then I asked the follow-up question, how tall is he? And the assistant gave me the direct height, sort of like having a direct conversation. I had my friend next to me at the time using Apple Siri. He did the same thing, follow-up question, nothing of the sort, just went to some Google search of saying, how tall is he? So as we see, machine learning is continuously improving and personalizing to enhance the user's experience. So I'll pass it back to Bilal and to talk about the cons and concluding the presentation.
Thank you, Ben. So one of the biggest drawbacks is the privacy invasion. These devices, as Ben said, are around us 24/7. And while they're there, they collect information to customize our experience and make it a bit more personal. But this information could possibly be misused on the long run. Now, even though these devices act as a substitute to humans, there are some sensitive situations that they might not be able to handle appropriately. And that's due to the lack of human emotion, or there is no human emotion that they involve, and they are not programmed to solve such issues. Well, yet at least. The technology and development involved in these devices can be very expensive, which can limit the reach of these products to only those who can afford it. Not only this, but on the long, there will be other costs involved, such as maintenance, or at some point, if the device isn't working anymore, you might have to replace it. Finally, these devices provide convenience, but with convenience comes laziness. Because think about it, in the end, these tasks can be done by us. We can set our own alarms. We can, call someone. We can go research this information or play our own music. But when we think about it, when it's few words away, well, that's so much easier. Why do I have to do something? And that increases or actually decreases our productivity and might have long-term effects such as like decreased memory capacity or other things. So just to wrap it up, the sector of machine learning and personal assistance has great potential and is growing rapidly and keeps developing to increase convenience, solve problems, and it also provides services that humans sometimes can't provide. But this all comes at a long-term cost. So the question is, will people adapt and accept the new technology even with its drawbacks? Or will the cons outweigh the pros, and this will just be a trend that will end soon? Thank you for listening, and these are references, and back to the discussion question. Ben?
So back to the discussion question. So as Paul mentioned in the cons about decreased memory capacity, I mentioned there's increased productivity. So do you believe virtual assistants make us more productive or lazier as they get smarter? So we'll leave it at that.
Does anyone want to answer that in the chat or the mic? Maha, go ahead.
That's kind of a tough question because it really have to think about how our future is changing and how society is changing with it. I mean, as we go further on, the way we work and the way we live is becoming increasingly more complex. And so it might be that virtual assistants or all these kind of computerized assistants might just be necessary in order to maintain the same amount of productivity or just keep up with the world.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have something to say? All right. All right. Thanks, Ben and Bilal. That was a good presentation. And yeah, we're gonna move on to our second last, two more presentations actually. So no one has volunteered, but I'll just pick because we are time stressed right now. So Avinash and Eamon, are you guys here? You just entered the room.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. Can I share my screen?
Yeah. Is your other partner here or?
Yeah, he's here.
Yep, I'm here.
He's having some connectivity issues. So.
Mhm. You guys can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. So hello everyone. My name is Avnish and my partner's name is Emma, and today we're going to talk about the comparison of AI and the human brain. So to start with our presentation, we are basing our presentation off of this question: do you believe that it's possible to build a computer that has all the capabilities of a human brain? If yes, do we need to understand how the brain works in order to build computers that can outperform us? Or if no, what is so special about human cognition that it can be done by wires, microchips, and electronics? So first, I'm going to start with how AI was created and brought into this world. So the AI can be traced to so the term artificial intelligence was firstly coined in 1956 at a conference at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, and the modern AI was um, thought of by philosophers to describe human thinking as a system that is more robust, fast, and efficient. And from 1957 to 1974, AI had a huge jump, as you can see in the timeline at the bottom. It was significant. It was had a more significant growth and is continuing to have a much more exponential growth since we have started investing more in it, and it has helped our life become much more easier. Helped many industries save money due to optimization and speed and efficiency and speed. And the purpose of AI. So it the purpose of AI isn't just to mimic the human brain, even though we all think of it and define it to somehow mimic human intelligence. It is to further increase the power of our human brain and the possibilities in terms of processing speed, data collection, selecting better routes, and optimizing the system overall. And as you can see in this picture, presented by many other groups, Deep Blue, a very famous AI system, beat the famous world champion Gary Kasparov, and that was a major achievement for artificial intelligence. And from there on, we have only exponentially grown into the power of AI. And to compare the AI to the human brain, it is very complex because there could be many perspectives and many methods to do so. And as you can see, the human brain, it contains 86 billion neurons, which is a lot. And these neurons is what are what make learning possible. And and they allow for thought formation, which is something not AI can do right now. Our current state of AI is only can only take information, uh, store it in memory, use it, and using some decision-making algorithms decide which one is convenient, good, or bad, depending on its application, and move on and provide us with results. But humans can create thoughts and think of hypothetical situations, use their imagination to think of new concepts, and can easily access memory faster through from their past. Sorry. And to compare the human brain versus AI, the difference is that the human brain is able to think and imagine, and also restore. No, sorry, not restore. To uh, obtain obtain thoughts from its past. But AI is solely dependent on the data it is given, and the algorithms it has to follow to process that data and provide the results expected. Um, the thing is that humans can learn from their past mistakes, and we could say that AI could also uh, decide something that is good or bad for a certain application, but it cannot tell unless we provide it with a sufficient foundation, or a very robust decision-making algorithm of some sort, which is highly complex and takes a lot of time for us to think about. And the only possible way for machines or artificial intelligence used in machines to learn information is through regular training, and that is something that is not that is something that is not very useful compared to the thinking procedures that are unique to humans. And now my friend Eamon will talk about the rest for the rest of the presentation.
Okay, so now on who's better, humans or AI? Now, current advancements in AI are closely imitating human intelligence now than ever before. Yet, computers are still well beyond what our brains are capable of. Now, AIs are not built for creative pieces of work. So, it should be crystal clear by now that creativity or imagination is not the forte of AIs. AI lacks creativity and the ability to create something special. The reason is that skills like playing chess or performing a task can be learned and mastered, but creative abilities only come naturally and can only be honed. As we know, machines can handle more data at speedier rate as compared to humans, as humans cannot beat the speed of computers. For example, while one doctor can make a diagnosis in 10 minutes, AI systems can make a million for the same time with much more accuracy and precision. In the field of oncology and diagnosis of cancer, it's challenging for humans to have an absolute accurate. Oh, hello. I think I got kicked out. Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. For some reason I can't see the screen, so I'll just continue with my stuff. Yeah. So I was at, for example, in the field of oncology and diagnosis of cancer. Hold on a second. Yeah. Diagnosis of cancer is challenging for humans to have an absolute accurate diagnosis, according to the research by University Hospitals Birmingham. The delivery results of AI systems correctly detected a disease state 87% of the time, compared with 86% for healthcare professionals, and correctly gave the
You're cutting out again. Hello? Let's give him a minute.
bad right now. So yeah. Now the next point. Could you go one slide behind? Okay, yeah. Now, AI doesn't improve with experience. AI has a repetitive nature where the input doesn't change. If if there's some change in the input, then AIs need to be reassessed, retrained, and rebuilt. For example, if you ask Siri a question which she isn't sure about, then Siri just does a quick Google search and doesn't have the ability to learn. So if you ask the same question again, Siri is always going to give the same output. Now, next slide. Limitations to building an AI equal to the human brain are, since AI is in the development stage, the future lies in how well we advance with our technologies. As with our current technology, building on AI close to human brain will be impossible, as we need tons and tons of data and neural networks, which is very hard to duplicate and thus cannot be created and physically cannot be stored. For example, our human brain, in our human brain, there are 1.8 to 3.2 into 10 raised to 14 synapses. So according to the procedure Wickman outlines, this suggests that brain stores around 180 to 320 terabytes of data. So for an AI to be equal or greater than the human brain, we will need much more data than what our brain requires. Our hardware is not remotely close either. Silicon wafers can't even get close, as it's going to need exponentially more computing power to build to be equal to the human brain. And building an AI, advanced AI, has very high cost of implementation. And to give you an idea about this high cost, Apple's virtual assistant Siri was acquired for more than $200 million. And setting up AI-based machines, computers, etc., entails huge cost, given the complexity of engineering that goes into building one. Further, the astronomical expense doesn't stop there, as repair and maintenance also run into thousands of dollars. Next slide. Even though AI has helped develop intelligent machines that can outperform humans in some respect, they still have a long way to go to match the human brain's potential. Although AI systems are designed and trained to mimic and simulate human behavior, they still cannot make rational decisions like humans do. As we discussed, as humans have the amazing ability to learn and apply the required knowledge in combination with logic, reasoning, and understanding. And since scientists and researchers still don't know the mystery behind human thought process, it is highly unlikely that we'll create machines that can quote unquote think like humans anytime soon. Yeah. Next slide.
And these are our references.
Yeah. So
All right.
that's it for.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. We're not going to do discussion because we're stressed for time, because we also want to answer the questions for people at the end of the class. So we're just going to move on. We have one more group. It is Peyton and Rahul.
Yep.
Yeah. Eamon, you're going to have to unshare your screen so Peyton can share his screen. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.
And you can start whenever you're ready.
All right, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So my presentation is going to be on machine learning and virtual personal assistants. And so before we actually get into this specific application of AI, it's important to understand what machine learning is first. Machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence that employs empirical data and algorithms to solve problems in a wide range of software applications. Machine learning refers to the ability of machines to discover diverse patterns and learn how to solve new issues by inputting data. It can be found in Google, Facebook, and Uber's operations in many forms for different purposes. Some of these include customer relationship management software, also known as CRM software, which is a machine learning application that helps salespeople communicate with their customers by evaluating human encounters and improving time management, efficiency, and the overall customer experience. Machine learning is also used in business intelligence analytics to analyze current data and look for common trends before making conclusions based on statistical inputs. Machine learning can also be used by human resource information systems to identify good applicants in a job search by matching new employee traits to job criteria, as well as a broad range of enticing job characteristics. And machine learning's impact on self-driving cars, as well as digital media, has already been covered by previous groups. Now, this presentation will focus on its role in virtual personal assistants. So what exactly is a virtual personal assistant, or a VPA for short? A VPA is a sophisticated computer program that receives voice or text input and executes activities in response. If you think about it literally, a virtual personal assistant aspires to be able to perform the same responsibilities as a real personal assistant, although the technology has not yet progressed that far. VPAs operate by combining natural language processing, NLP, natural language understanding, NLU, and dialogue management strategies. Natural language processing and understanding are comparable, but NLP focuses on the exact definition of a phrase, whereas NLU attempts to determine the true meaning or intent of a statement using context. Because VPAs are based on speech and text interactions, both of these are required for them to work. There are also dialogue management mechanisms in place to help the computer better understand what we're attempting to communicate. Some notable examples of VPAs include Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, but they can also be found in more common places like customer service chatbots, or even the one that we have on the McMaster website. Now, virtual assistants employ machine learning algorithms to execute simple tasks while constantly evaluating personal interactions to improve the user experience. Before making their request, users can usually say the VPA's name as a wake-up call to activate it, like "Hey Siri" or "Hey Alexa." When a request is made to the VPA, the AI analyzes the language, the tone, and the context of the request and matches it to the command it believes that was asked for. This process is typically used for more complex inputs, and it's saved in a database in case it is needed again. More frequent inquiries, such as asking for the time or asking for the weather, can be completed faster because the VA can quickly locate this information as it has in the past many times.
Now, specifically, Alexa Voice Service, or AVS, which is a cloud-based voice service designed by Amazon, imitates a real conversation with the help of intuitive voice command. This program allows device makers to integrate the skills of Alexa into connected devices, which can be very beneficial as the skill set of Alexa has drastically increased in the past several years. As of January of 2016, Alexa only had 130 skills, but 3 years later, her skills surpassed the 100,000 marks. This is just one example of one brand of a VPA, but it already shows the rate at which this technology is developing, and it looks very promising. So as with all forms of AI, VPAs come with their own set of pros and cons, many of which are inherently subjective, but still important to know. First, let's go through some of these benefits. VPAs in general allow users to quickly access information that the VPA already possesses or can readily discover via connected search engines, allowing them to interact with the digital world without having to use a computer. This just makes it easier to access and use online information or services. Users can listen to music or podcasts, answer text messages and phone calls, and even use the speech-to-text tool to create vast quantities of text. So theoretically, you could write an entire essay using a VPA, although I would not recommend it. VPAs can also be connected to smart systems within your household to improve security and overall reduce energy consumption. You can easily monitor and manage your house, even if you're not there, by giving your VPA management of key features such as lights and alarm systems. And to save energy, VPAs can, for example, switch lights off if no one's there after a given amount of time. It can also monitor the inside and outside of the house, which is useful in the event of a break-in or if you just want to keep an eye on your kids in the future. After going to the dentist, a man was unable to use his speech-activated VPA at home, according to an advertisement. Of course, this is an advertisement, so it's an exaggerated depiction, as many VPAs now have improved their comprehension and can also be controlled by touch and, in some circumstances, facial recognition, like on your phone. Now, in the workplace, VPAs can also be used by workers to carry out repetitive tasks that would normally be performed by a human. And more advanced models could even make strategical business decisions using statistical data, calculations, and current contextual patterns. Now, some may claim that this technology will replace humans, resulting in increased unemployment, but I personally believe that it will benefit the company in the long run, since it drives the workforce to broaden their skill set and be able to perform tasks that simple robots cannot. But I'll leave that up to discussion. Furthermore, not all job activities may be performed just through calculations. You might need what was called the human touch. And now we'll look at some of these drawbacks of employing VPAs. So the introduction of VPAs into the home has sparked numerous worries about the user's privacy. These fears were confirmed when a former Amazon executive revealed that Alexa does indeed record conversations, but not for any nefarious purposes. VPAs would typically want to record talks in order to evaluate them and improve, for example, Alexa's functionality. Regardless, users have a right to be concerned if a device is recording all of their speech interactions. Any personal information stored on a VPA can be accessed by someone else because technically any device can be hacked. So you might think twice before giving control of your home security system to your VPA. I took it upon myself to actually do an experiment with my friend's Amazon Echo and asked if it's recording me. Now, whenever you ask if one of these VPAs is recording you, it will give you a statement about how it respects your privacy and that you can log onto a website to review what has been recorded. However, blocking a VPA from recording your interactions can actually make it less effective because these recordings are only used for the VPA's personal development. You can always check what has been captured and remove a specific recording using Amazon Alexa, which is a new upgrade to the overall privacy concerns solution. Additionally, certain comprehension challenges have always existed as a result of stuttering or thick accents or just imperfect speech in general. Both natural language processing and natural language understanding are involved in this process. VPAs may not be able to detect slang or poor speech as effectively as humans. However, this is a problem that affects both AI and human interaction as well, as we can't always understand what other people are saying. As a result, I believe that with additional time and testing, VPA's comprehension abilities will steadily increase to their maximum potential. Now, personal virtual assistants like Amazon Alexa and the one integrated into Google Home are still pricey, but it's up to the customer to decide whether the initial financial loss is worth the eventual comfort of using it.
And finally, VPAs are substantially slower than smartphones or laptops in terms of efficiency. This component is also influenced by the user's preference for convenience or efficiency. And there are various other advantages and disadvantages to employing VPAs, but these are some of the notable ones. So what exactly does the future look like for VPAs? As previously mentioned, with more tests being run, the overall functionality of VPAs will improve, including their ability to understand a multitude of inputs, whether through speech or text. Now, whether it's in the workplace or in the household, VPAs are becoming increasingly popular due to its variety of functions and convenience. It's been predicted that by 2025, 50% of knowledge workers will regularly use a virtual assistant. This new implementation of VPAs in the workplace will allow workers to focus on more complex tasks while leaving the repetitive ones to the AI. The demand for VPAs is set to increase as the technology continues to develop, but some privacy and ethical concerns may linger. One of the main hurdles to VPA's complete deployment in modern culture is our preparedness to use and trust them. There are and will always be privacy concerns when it comes to topics like audio recordings and such. Now, before allowing a product or the company behind it into their lives, consumers must have faith in it. The companies that produce these VPAs will aim to try and prevent their products from being hacked to increase the security of their databases, as well as the information of their customers and clients. And as a final thought, this is the question that I'm posing to you. What are some examples of personal information that you believe a virtual personal assistant should not have access to? Answering questions like these can help a developer better understand how to deal with the privacy concerns surrounding VPAs and in turn prepare it for broader adoption in modern society. But overall, I'm excited to see where this technology goes, and thank you for listening.
All right, that was a good presentation. Thank you for that. Does anybody want to answer the question that we'll just go back to the question that does anyone want to answer that quickly? Okay, I guess not. So we're just gonna conclude it here. Thank you everyone for the presentations and the participation through the chat and the mic. So this concludes our class. And if you have any questions, we will answer it now.
Yeah, we're just gonna be here for a little while. If you guys have any questions just about the general course and material. I appreciate everyone for coming. We didn't have a huge lecture turnout today, but those who came and participated got participation marks, so that was great. And yeah, feel free to ask away if you have anything. We'll be here for another 5-10 minutes.